what I'd like to do now is turn to our students' lives, their lives they plan as graduates, and look at the places where they'll live that out. And I'm going to start with the global city, Sassen's term again. This is the space for which many of our students will live out their careers and vocations. Those who aspire to be global mobiles will work in global cities. Global cities are paradoxical sites, places of both isolation and encounter. While such places as Manhattan, Sao Paulo, Dubai, Shanghai, or Kuala Lumpur are located in all sorts of diverse cultures, their business centers are often more integrated into the global space of corporate and financial networks than to their geographical region, or even the cities whose names they bear. Professionals working there will interact with other traders and consult with firms headquartered in other global cities. Think of an executive or trader for a Singapore bank working in Manhattan. She could live there for a decade without having significant cultural contact with the other boroughs of New York, let alone New Jersey. She will likely visit other American global cities and resort areas, flying over the vast, strange cipher of America that lies between them. Living in the space of the global mobile, there is not much time or need to attend to the politics of the places they are near. School funding, public health, unemployment. One can be there and not really be bound by the historical place, culture, or politics of the city or country at all. This is a profound problem for our desires as educators to instill in students a thick conception of vocation. Their work lives are doubly isolated from the consequences of their professional decisions through global financial and commodity chains, and from the communities in which they work. They are isolated from the feedback and obliging relations that demand accountability and responsibility, virtue, and character. The loss of broader spatial and social context combine to operationalize or even algorithmize their exercise of professional life. As I said, though, global cities are paradoxical. They're also dense sites of interaction. They host new forms of cross-cultural encounter. Previously marginalized urban groups, especially in the United States, are brought into close proximity with global elites. The inner city ceased to be a politically relevant site, but now, when gentrification is going on, suddenly they're cheek and jaw with the masters of the universe, and this is a proximity that was previously denied. Also, migrants and other global circuits intersect in global cities. The office and apartment buildings that serve the global class are built by migrant laborers from Latin America or Pakistan and cleaned by other migrants from Latin America, Africa, and the Philippines. Stephen Frears compellingly portrayed this reality in the film Dirty Pretty Things. Sassen describes a shift from civic space to an urban space politicized along these multiple differences. This has multiple outcomes. On the negative side, this high tension of these juxtapositions of the hyper-wealthy and the global underclass encourages a politics of barriers and exclusion. On the positive side, it can provide positive encounters across vast class and cultural differences not possible before. And for the focus of this conference, we should note that these are indeed often face-to-face encounters. While this is very much a game, unfortunately it takes place on the personal scale. Space does not become shared here. It does not easily expand into a broader political sphere that could render such encounters shareable and visible. Here we see one final aspect of the places our students are preparing to work. Their experience of the globe will be highly personal, as will the global networks they develop. At Georgetown, many of the students I taught were from the global mobile class. While they lived around the world, some even lived in third world manufacturing centers their parents managed or owned. Their experience was nonetheless mostly of the separate spaces of the global class. They almost universally described the global in terms of their personal networks of relatives, friends, and experiences. Students who offered some thick account of life in the third world or their home culture stood out as profound exceptions. I can count them on one hand, probably. No doubt there are others who had that knowledge, but that wasn't what they talked about when they said the global. I once observed in a classroom discussion that this personal mapping was their default, and that this bode ill for our hopes of an engaged cosmopolitan politics. And I was sort of wincing because this was a fairly direct and pointed statement. To my surprise, they simply accepted that portrayal, did not push back at all, both of their default understanding and of its political and ethical deficits. Here, global space very much resembles the Facebook newsfeed page. The newsfeed is the homepage for Facebook users. It's the first thing that pops up on the screen. I'm not a Facebook user, but I live with many who are, so I see it all the time. It presents itself as a hybrid of a news site and a blog, with various posts and a highly participatory set of comments. But this isn't public space. It's the nexus of one's personal friends list and their friends. It can stretch around the world and across vast cultural and political distances, but it remains a personal network. It looks public, but it's entirely the nexus that you're located in. This shared space that appears on the screen is unique to each viewer. But of course, not all of our students plan to be global mobiles or to work in global cities. Some plan to work in major cities, others hope to work in smaller cities and towns. Globalization, as many have learned with their livelihoods, is not a matter of the world out there. Globalization changes the physics of social space in a way that reforms all of our places. While smaller cities and towns are not the dense nexuses of global cities, they nevertheless experience the disjunctures and deterritorializations of global space. And we can recognize this when we return back home. Work in the smaller city or town is generally marked by the same economic abstraction that we described in the global city. Firms are transnational or held by larger holding companies. Even local, privately held manufacturers, of which there are many in this part of the country, are inextricably tied into global commodity chains and part sourcing. We are far from a time when the decisions of local firms were manifesting consequences evident solely on the local level, and when the fate of local firms and local employment was in the hands of decisions that took place on the local level. Thus, professionals face the same pressures towards a thinly operational mode of decision-making. Local politics becomes increasingly disempowered as the forces affecting the community become increasingly distant. Community organizing models also undergo profound crises as stakeholders and relevant decision makers and responsible parties cannot easily be brought together. Local life on any scale is also marked by a cultural abstraction, similar to the one I described in the global city. I spoke last year with a young woman working in a community service nonprofit in Dayton. She observed that although she had grown up in Dayton suburbs, and it's not a really big city, so this isn't a vast distance, only a few miles away, her family seldom ventured into the city, and she knew almost nothing of its history. She lived 2 miles away. One can be there and not there at all in small cities and towns, every bit as much as global cities. Our cities and small towns are marked by global cross-cultural intersections as well. Migrants displaced by poverty or violence half a world away arrive in towns that have never heard of them and take positions in the economy that undercut long-fought gains and often run traverse along historic fault lines. The same strategies of spatial division are also present as downtown shopping districts are abandoned for faux neighborhoods in ring suburbs, often safely beyond the reach of public transportation, by design, by a matter of feet. Where city shopping and entertainment centers are preserved and renewed, various means of exclusion are employed to protect suburban and tourist visitors, nostalgic urban experiences from actual city dwellers. The civic space of the city is segregated into low-income housing, gentrified and gated districts, and consumer districts of nostalgia and spectacle. We also find the same individualizing of space. Suburban neighborhoods often offer low levels of geographic involvement, rendering relationship networks much more self-selecting. Our neighborhoods and localities themselves are increasingly separated into demographically homogeneous clusters. This move towards homogenization of association and its concomitant cultural heterogeneation, I'm sorry, that's a little awful, that's not the sentence, right? So as we concentrate into groups like-minded, society around us becomes ever more polarized and heterogenized, has been reinforced profoundly by recent developments in communications technology. If the big three television networks constructed a shared sphere of discourse with common genres, subjects, and standards of access, within which a quite limited range of voices and opinions can be heard, the 500 channel offerings of digital television, let alone the uncountable options on the internet, free individuals from the friction and inertia of geographical space and constrained media systems. They're now free to choose to communicate with those who possess similar knowledge to themselves, similar commitments, similar preferences. We're not forced to rub against people unlike us. To close the circle for higher ed, this is the space from which the majority of our students come. They are already formed in the habits of global space, even if they've never left their suburb. They have little experience of the more settled forms of space that it's replacing, little experience of that geographic friction. As a result, they also have little awareness of how these dynamisms are transforming place, what's happening to them and around them. So the final section, how to respond to this. I'm aware that that sounded rather pessimistic. That's why I opened with the invocation of the enormous positive potential of the moment. I've tried not to present this as a story of the destruction of places, but rather as an epical transformation in the nature of space that's transforming our places. This way of looking at the problem, I think, saves us from a nostalgic response that attempts to return to the local in reaction against the global. While there are parts of the world where that's possible, ours is not one of them. We should be aware that many of our students come to higher education looking precisely for mobility. As Zygmunt Bauman notes, in a global world, it's precisely those who are able to move through space who are the winners, and those who remain stuck in space end up the losers. And our students know this, right? They see what happened to their towns, and they don't want to be trapped anywhere. They want the skills that can make them be able to always ride that. I think this shows up very much in changes to the romantic lives of our students over the past 20 years. I haven't taught undergrads yet at the University of Dayton, but I once asked students, I would often ask students at Georgetown, how many of you plan on finding your spouse before the end of your senior year? Right? It was a joke. And the main reason is, right, a dyad is not mobile. To get two jobs, right, in the same city or in some area, as graduate students who are in relationships know, right, is very difficult. So there are vast social mores that are changing behind that, but the economic construction of that is often unexamined, right? A couple is not mobile. Education in America has long been tied to mobility. A college education was a ticket out of the working class and out of working class spaces. This was the imperative that was given to myself and my siblings all through our life by everyone in our family, right? Go to college, don't be working class, get out of here. My experience since grade school has been one of being prepared for escape velocity. I attended Gouverneur Hance Elementary School in what were then the exurbs of North Pittsburgh. Hance's picture hung on the vestibule of the school. He looked just like Michel Foucault. And we'd say this to ourselves, each other every day as we walked past it. And he seemed to be wearing he was wearing a cowl, like a monk's, some sort of monk. I was told at one point that he was a Dutch Calvinist and some kind of monk. And that's the fullest part of the story that I ever got. I have no idea who Gouverneur Hance was. It's spelled governor, so when you Google him, you just get all these governors who had some kind of Hance in their life. I have no idea who Gouverneur Hance was, and what a Dutch Calvinist in a monk's cowl would be doing naming the school in North Pittsburgh. I can't imagine that. There must be something, but no one was ever able to tell me, and I think it was very telling. And I'm hoping, actually, I brought that up because I think there's a decent chance one of you might know.